Welcome to The Mental Edge, the podcast that explores the fascinating world of peak performance and mental resilience. I'm your host, Riley Braun, and I'm here to guide you on a journey into the minds of exceptional individuals who have unlocked their true potential. In our very first episode, we dive into the art of identifying success with a renowned expert in the field of mental conditioning, Robert Andrews. Robert has worked with Olympic athletes, professional sports teams, and high-performing individuals from all walks of life. Robert is the founder and director of the Institute of Sports Performance and has been in private practice as a mental training consultant and licensed therapist for 28 years. He has helped produce numerous Olympic gold, silver, and bronze medalists and world champions. What's it been like to work with Olympic athletes, and what kind of problem do you fix for them? What's the number one problem an athlete has when they show up? What's the solution to that problem? Do all athletes benefit from sports psychology treatment? The Mental Edge isn't just another podcast. It's your roadmap to excellence. If you'd like to stay tuned for future episodes, please subscribe or follow the podcast. And the best way to support the podcast is by going to our Patreon page, which is in the description. So get ready to dive deep into the world of high-performance psychology, discover the secrets to identifying success, and take the first steps towards becoming the best version of yourself. Episode 1, Identifying Success with Robert Andrews, is just the beginning of our journey together. All right. Today's guest, Robert Andrews. Here, I guess you're the owner?
And founder, yes.
And founder, okay. Of the Sports Institute?
The Institute of Sports Performance.
Okay, it's hard to keep track of all the which order it is. The Institute of Sports Performance.
Okay.
And really, you try and get athletes back into their top performance, right?
Yeah, but I also see a lot of peak performers that are already performing well. They just want to get better.
They just want to get
So
better.
it's not always the struggling athlete. Sometimes it is. Oftentimes it is.
Okay.
But I have elite athletes that might be trying to make it to national championships or Olympic trials or the Olympics, and they're already elite level athletes. They just want to find that extra little edge to help them boost their performance up to where they can reach their goals that way.
Right. Okay. No, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's just introduce yourself, where you're from, and how you got into this first.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting story. I grew up in Friendswood, Texas, between Houston and Galveston. And when I moved there, it was a town of about 600 people. It was a really cool place to grow up. And they brought in NASA, right, in the early 60s. And it just took off because all these astronauts and people involved with NASA moved there.
Right.
And we drew some amazing mentors there. So I grew up under the influence of high school principals and directors and coaches that were just phenomenal leaders and mentors. And they just laid this foundation of character in all of us. And the guys that I'm still close to, that's one of the things we have in common is that we share this honor, integrity, respect, doing the right thing, holding people accountable that aren't. And so, it was just a great place for me to grow up. And we just happened to have amazing sports teams. Like the years that I was playing football there, we went to, when I was in 8th grade, state semifinals, sophomore year state semifinals, junior year state champions. My senior year, we lost one district game. We didn't go to the playoffs because that's how they did it back then. But we probably would have won state if we would have gone Division II nowadays. Again, we had some amazing athletes. Basketball, we went to state 3 years and won a state championship. We had drill team and band were states. I mean, it was amazing. It was
a lot of success.
But done the right way. Done the right way. And I talk to people all the time. They say they have. Coaches have to be tough and hard, and the kids need to fear their coaches. You know what? I was never afraid of my coaches. I was never intimidated by them. I was never walking on eggshells around them. I was empowered to go out there and focus on running hurdles or high jumping or playing tight end or defensive end or whatever it was. That's where my focus was. It wasn't on are they going to kick me out of practice? Are they going to humiliate me in front of people and all that? No. And so with the greatness and the athletic success we had, I know that there's an effective way to coach and still get that.
Okay.
So that kind of leads me into when I was a sophomore in high school, I was covering a kickoff, and a guy hit me in my knee, which is nowadays an illegal block. And I tore 3 ligaments, the medial meniscus, ruptured the fluid capsule, strained the patellar tendon.
Oh, my gosh.
And about 8 years ago, I got inducted into my high school athletic hall of honor, and one of my old high school coaches introduced me, and he said, well, Robert had a really bad injury, and they said he shouldn't have been playing anymore. And I said, what? I never got that message, but I came back 9 months later and played. That year we won state, but I wasn't the same. And I knew in the back of my mind, I hit it very, very well, but I was afraid of getting hurt again.
And you were like 80%.
I don't know. Okay. I wasn't all there, because in the back of my mind, it was, the hesitation. I could watch film and see me going into tackles hesitating like I didn't before.
Right.
So, I played, ran hurdles, high jumped and all that, and, 3-sport athlete, and thought I was going to go play college football, and I separated my shoulder again, and that's when I hung it up. Okay. And so I went into oil and gas. Market dried up there. My company just went from 190 employees like I was to 9. And I said, I got to go somewhere else. And then I went into investment banking, and then Black Monday hit, the stock market crashed. So I kept getting into these fields, and the market would collapse, So I said, what do I really want to do? So I took a sabbatical and just kind of went inside and came out on the other side of that. I went back and got a master's degree in psychology.
And how old were you when you did that?
29.
So you went to a lot of industries all in your 20s and then went into
but they were all valuable experiences.
That makes sense.
Because everything I learned in oil and gas was about petroleum land management and taking title history from the present to the past and then bringing it forward and see who the owners were. I use those skills with athletes. What's going on now?
Yeah.
Where did you get off track in the past? And now let's put those corrections in and bring you back into the present empowered. Right. So I'm using the skills that I used as a landman in my work with athletes. And in investment banking, that helped me boldly market myself and learn how to strategize and brand. And so I'm using all those experiences in this business. So I did 10 years of traditional psychotherapy, but in that practice, a lot of my work was around trauma. So I saw people that had been through fatal and near fatal automobile accidents, domestic violence. I had one guy was mountain climbing and slid down the ice over a ledge, 3,000-foot drop, but he landed on a little ledge and broke his leg, and he laid there for 9 hours.
Wow.
And a helicopter finally found him, and so I helped him through that trauma. And
how did he survive that?
The helicopter found him, and they airlifted him and got him out. But you talk about traumatized.
The fall alone.
Well, he's lucky. Mind. There was a ledge the size of this chair I'm sitting in, and he landed on that. Otherwise,
even further.
He'd be gone now. So I helped him through that trauma, and I had a woman who almost died giving birth to her daughter. So I did that for about 10 years. And then one day I was out with my wife at lunch, and I started crying, and she goes, what? And I said, I know what I'm supposed to do next. And she said, what? And I said, I'm supposed to take all of my experience with trauma and my training and all the protocols that I have in place, and I'm supposed to help injured athletes.
Yeah.
And she says, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, ACLs are traumatic.
Yeah.
Broken arms, concussions are traumatic, and nobody's helping them with that. They just get them ready physically.
Yeah.
You're 100% cleared.
Right.
Now go play.
Yeah.
And she said, where'd that come from? And I said, I think it's a God thing, because it was so clear. So an old friend of mine, Steve Van Meter, we grew up together. He was head coach, football coach and athletic director at Friendswood and Hutto and one of the Pflugerville schools. Well, when he was at Friendswood, I took him to lunch and explained what happens to an athlete when they're injured. The athletic trainer examines them, the team doctor, if they need surgery, they prepare for that, and then they do their physical therapy and rehab and go play. And he goes, yep, that's pretty much it. And I said, do they suffer any grief or fear or loss or frustration or anger? And he goes, yeah. Fear of re-injury? Yeah. Who's helping them with that? And he says, well, nobody. I said, well, that's what I want to do. So he sent me my first athlete.
Okay.
And it was a 6'4", 290-pound offensive lineman that had torn his ACL, and he was afraid of getting hurt again.
Yeah.
And I saw him 3 times, went to his first scrimmage that season, and it was against the team that he had been injured the year before. So he had missed the whole season the year before.
Wow.
And before he saw me, he said, I'm going to tell them I'm sick. I don't want to play them again. I don't want to play in that scrimmage. I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt.
Right.
And so saw him 3 times, did the protocol, went to the scrimmage and watched. I was on the sidelines. and the guy was a beast. I mean, he just was destroying people. And his mother came up after the scrimmage, and she says, I don't know what you did to my son, but he doesn't have any fear anymore. And I knew I was on to something then.
Yeah.
And so I focused on injuries for a while, and then people started asking about performance. And I had done this training called the Accelerated Behavior Change Training that had a whole bunch of life skills and emotional intelligence concepts. So I started weaving those into my practice. And within a year and a half, I was at the Beijing Olympics. I had done some work with 3 guys that made it to Olympic trials.
Wow.
And, just like that, it started taking off. And then, as they say, the rest has been a pretty nice journey. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's a lot of memorabilia around your office of Olympic stuff specifically.
Last time I counted, I think I've worked with athletes from 9 different countries and 13 different Olympic sports.
Okay.
And so that's why you see a lot of this. And like this up here was a gift from one of the coaches from the women's Olympic championship team back in 2016. And she had all the girls sign that. And, athletes just come in and say, hey, I want you to have this. And I said, well, you understand that, there's confidentiality. They said, you have my permission to hang it in your office. And
that's cool.
When you walk out there, there's lots of photos out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. That's super cool. Well, speaking of which, what's it been like to work with Olympic athletes, and what kind of problem do you fix for them most often?
It's had its ups and downs. There's been moments where, like, my wife and I went to the Beijing Olympics and watched a team that nobody thought would make the team finals win a bronze medal. That was hands down one of the most remarkable experiences of my career, just being a part of that and witnessing that. And then I had one girl won 2 golds and 2 silvers in Rios, and one other one won 4 golds and a bronze in Rio, and another one won 2 golds and a silver or a gold and a silver. And
wow.
So Rio was phenomenal. I had to change my practice. I had to hire people after 2016 to come in and fill in the gap. I just didn't have enough room to see anybody. So I've had some really amazing ones come in here that are currently with me, and I've had some that didn't cut it for different reasons,
Right.
and I had to let them go or they left. But I've got an amazing team around me now. 2021 was different. It was more helping athletes deal with more mental crisis around, COVID and isolation and not having family at the Olympics, and the stresses that came with, training with a mask and fear of getting COVID. And it really short-circuited a lot of athletes. But the first place I always look is injuries.
Okay.
And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I'm fine. Like I had one guy that was trying to make it to the Olympic trials, and he was a former Olympian, and he had hurt his knee and missed the Olympics that next quad. And then he came to see me for the next Olympic run, and he had hurt his knee. And I said, how are you with it? He goes, oh, I'm fine. So I said, well, let's see. So we did an injury evaluation, and then we did this EMDR work with his injury that I do. And when we finished, he said, I had no idea that was there. And the reason I always look at injuries first is because they take up so much space in the brain.
Right.
And it becomes unconscious. They don't even know
Right.
that they're favoring, protecting, afraid of getting hurt.
Right.
But it's there, and those programs are running in the background. So we teach the brain, the nervous system, and the body how to process that trauma.
Right.
And then they get that energy back,
Yeah.
and then it's channeled into their training and their performance. And
Right.
we always see it just, if they're healthy physically, we always see performance just go usually above and beyond
Where they were before.
if they're healthy, if they're physically healthy. Yeah,
Okay.
because they learn so much in the process.
And if they're not, then you find out that they're not healthy.
And
pretty quickly.
that's their physical therapists and their doctors
Right.
handle back to them. And
Yeah. I've only had some recent physical therapy done to me within the past year, just because of golf. I got into golf like my junior year of high school, and I never experienced any pain. But then through college, all through like my college years, I had this like back pain, and I wasn't playing golf really. Like I didn't have a golf course to really go to. Like I wasn't going to spend money on that. I'm a college student. So I was like, well, I'm not playing anymore. So why is like the pain still there? And I was super physically active, going to the gym all the time, doing this all the time. And then, and I was like, I could feel it impacting my mental capability and also just like mainly my emotions. And my fuse was like a lot shorter, and I could just feel it like triggering way faster. Mm-hmm. And so if someone would get me upset, I could just like I could just turn on a dime and immediately be upset, and that would upset me. I'm like, why did I just get upset at that? Like, there's no reason for me to be upset at this. And so eventually, once I graduated and went home, and I still kind of had that pain, I worked at a gym for a while, and there, my boss, the main trainer there at that gym, said, you should go and see. Her name is Dr. Payne. Is hilarious.
Wow.
I went to go and it's like Payne with an E at the end, and I went to go and talk to her, and she immediately was like, well, here's what your problem is. In the first session, I'm like crying out of pain. Mm-hmm. But it was the most relief I've ever had. And since then, I've had zero back pain.
Wow. Well, you're lucky you found the right person.
I'm so grateful that I found Dr. Payne, and she completely changed my life pretty much.
Well, I want to interject something here. The amygdala is the part of the brain that regulates emotion.
Okay.
And so it scans our environment, just assessing threats all day long. And when we go into like chronic pain like that, the amygdala can get lit up. And it takes a lot of energy to be in pain all the time. So it can make you short fused like that.
Okay.
Because your amygdala is lit up and it's on full alert like that. So some stimulus comes in and you can get snippy with people.
Okay.
Because that's when I do an injury evaluation, one of the questions is, are you experiencing grief, sadness, anger? A lot of times anger's on the high end of the scale there. Yeah, they're frustrated because their nervous system and their brain are lit up.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah.
Oh man, just for those like 3 years, I was just like an angry person. It was so bad. I was going to ask actually, what, like, usually I know that there's not just one solution, for all athletes, but in general, what's like the number one solution that you find for a lot of athletes? Like when you are taking them through like a mental rehabilitation, what, like, obviously there's like a lack of confidence, and let's just say that they're like 100% physically. Mm-hmm. So what are you doing to get them back to 100% confident in the fact that their body is fully capable, and to get rid of the doubt?
Okay, so I want to circle back to your question about Olympic athletes first, and that'll help answer this question.
Okay.
Because everybody has this misperception that at the Olympic level they don't have any problems.
Right.
Because performance-wise, they make it look so easy, right?
Yes.
But we look at issues with parents or relationships, and a lot of them have financial issues because they don't have a ton of sponsors.
Right.
Or they have issues with low confidence, or they're being overlooked because of favoritism, or not picked for this team because of politics, being coached the wrong way. Like I had one athlete, like I do a lot of work with learning styles with athletes to find out the most effective way for them to learn. And it could be, are they visual learners? Are they auditory learners? Are they read-write learners? Or are they what are called kinesthetic learners? And the further you go in sports, the more kinesthetic they become. And what that means is that the athlete wants to be shown, told, watch a video, given instruction. Now let me work with it. Let me struggle a little bit. Now come back, give me some more feedback.
Right.
And then let's just keep working that system, that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to fail. And we see too many no mistakes coaches out there.
Yeah.
You made a mistake, somebody else get in there.
Yes.
Who wants to get in and show us how to do this?
Yes.
Go sit on the bench.
Right.
Go do conditioning. Just go home. And what they're doing, they don't understand this, but they're short-circuiting the athlete's learning style. They're literally short-circuiting their brain, and they wonder why they're not effective with that athlete.
Right.
So what I do, one of the first things I do with performance is, how do you learn best?
Right.
And like when I have athletes that are getting ready to go off to college, and they're going out and doing recruiting trips, I have them talk to coaches and talk to athletes that are currently there to find out how this coach instructs and teaches and empowers.
Right.
And if they're a verbal only and they don't allow room for mistakes, and you're a kinesthetic learner, or you're a visual learner, and they're just telling you, and then they get frustrated when you don't get, that's not going to be a good place for you.
Yeah.
And it's eye-opening for these athletes and their parents. Like, oh my gosh, I never thought about. Like, I had one girl who had a coach that was pretty horribly abusive to her. Very, very talented, and was totally short-circuiting her learning styles. In addition to the, I would go as far as to say abusive behaviors. And I said, "What are you doing there? You know, what are you doing there?" And the family story was, "We're not quitters. You know, we don't quit." And I said, "Okay, well then y'all go ahead and let her finish up this career of this abusive coach, is coaching her the wrong way. And then when she's done, get back with me and I'll help repair the damage." And they, what? I called them on it, and I was willing to back away.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't gonna work with her in an abusive environment. I wasn't gonna be a part of that and act like nothing was going on.
Right.
And they talked as a family. It's like, thank you for opening our eyes to that. And she transferred out and had all these offers and is happy as a lark now, getting coached the right way.
Wow.
So that's where we start. We do a lot of work on, there's 5 key components for building confidence, and we take a look at all 5 of those to see, and that puts it right in front of them. You need to work on what you're focused on.
Okay.
Or you need to gain more knowledge or experience. You need to go in and get better preparation.
Okay.
You need to look at your mindset and get more positive feedback from coaches, parents, yourself. So we look at all these different areas of confidence builders and find out where they have weaknesses and where they have strengths, make corrections there. I look at how they handle distractions in their life. Are they taking care of business? Because if, let's say, an athlete has a very important baseball or softball tournament that's going to be a college showcase, and they've got some big project due the next day in school, or let's say it's a college baseball player that's got the Friday night start, and they have a calculus exam and a team project Monday and Tuesday, and they haven't even started preparing for them.
Right.
So it's how much of their brain is really going to be focused on throwing strikes, or pole vaulting, or running hurdles, and how much of their brain is going to be whirling in the background going, oh my gosh, I've got this research project done Tuesday and I haven't even started it. So we look at distractions. Right. How do you take care of business? What are relationships like with your parents and coaches and teammates?
Yeah.
So, that, and I think that's what makes us different in my practice is we have what we call a whole person approach.
Okay.
And we look at all aspects. Like one of the guys on that Beijing team over there, when he came to see me, he said, I don't want to leave any stone unturned. And we didn't. We looked everywhere.
Okay.
And so what we're doing is we're lifting under those stones, we're finding energy, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And when he takes care of distractions or handles things from his past or has better relationships with his girlfriend or his family members or gets financial support, then he's freeing his mind up and reclaiming energy. And then that energy is energy for success. So we don't just do breathing and visualization. I call that neck up sports psychology.
Right.
And that's what everybody teaches is, like, I had one guy, he was a Major League Baseball pitcher, very well-known name I was working with.
You're not allowed to mention
not his name, no.
Okay.
Some I can, some I can't, but not his.
Okay.
And we finished our first session, and he goes, wow. And I said, what? And he goes, I didn't know sports psychology was this involved. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, our sports psych on the team, every time I talk to him, they say, okay, just see yourself throwing strikes and say, I got this. And I said, for the whole session? And he goes, yeah. He has me close my eyes and visualize myself throwing strikes and saying, I got this. And we were opening this whole new world to him.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. He had a little kid, and he was somewhat distracted with wanting to be home with his son. And he felt bad because he was traveling, and his wife was home with a new baby. And so, we look at that stuff. But it's not see yourself throwing strikes and I got this. There's a lot more to it, And that's at the Major League Baseball level. Go figure.
That's so crazy.
Yes,
I can't believe that's happening at that level. So yeah, I guess maybe you could have talked to the team. Hey, this is going on. That's unbelievable. Well, what's fascinating to me more than more than just the solutions is some of the difference between people who are very successful at their sport. We can define what success is for each athlete, but what's interesting to me is like their goal, and like what's actually pushing them through like physical therapy, or pushing them through what you do, specifically sports psychology. So that to me is like a huge difference between a lot of athletes. When I was reading about it in one of Bob Rotella's books, he's like, every athlete has a completely different goal, and when that goal shifts and they have like a new goal, now they have more energy towards whatever it is. But what I don't understand is some of these athletes that just, it seems like they don't even have one. It seems like they're just going. And do you give them a goal when they come through your system? Do you help them find one?
I ask a question. My first question, if it's only on performance, because as I said in our intro, I work with injuries a lot. That's about 60-70% of my practice. But the other 30-40% is performance. The first question I ask them, it comes from a book called The Question.
Okay.
And I say, if I run into you at a track meet or a swim meet 3 years from now, and I come up and say hi and we're talking, what would needed to have happened during that 3 years for you to feel like you made a good decision to work with me?
Right.
And I see them look away. They go, God, that's a really good question. And they think about it, and they go, I want to have more confidence. Okay. I want to be having more fun. I want to be playing at a D1 school. I want to be on the national team. I want to be playing in the NFL or MLB, or I want to make it to the Olympics. And I want to build more character. I want to have more resilience or resolve. I'm writing all that down.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, we can accomplish all that and a lot more. And when we help them achieve those, not so much the status, I'll say, the national team, but when we look at character and having fun and building confidence and learning how to enjoy their sport more and manage distractions or pressure, whatever it is, we're helping them build character traits.
Right.
And that's the foundation they stand on. And then they usually go further than what they wanted. So when I first started working with Simone Biles, I worked with her from 2013 to 2017, just after the Rio Olympics. And her first goal was to make the U.S. national team. And she just won her 8th national title.
Yeah.
And she has 4 Olympic golds and 2 bronze medals. And I wasn't working with her for the Tokyo Olympics, but I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I think if I would have been, it would have been a different Olympic experience for her because she made some changes. I don't know why, but she made changes in her team going into Tokyo. And as you can see, it had catastrophic results for her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, and again, I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I'm confident that we could have avoided what happened to her in 2021. She got off her foundation.
Yes.
She's back on that foundation again now.
Yes.
Because I watched her last week, and I said, that's the Simone I knew right there. Even more so now.
I remember seeing that in 2021. Yeah, and it was weird to see other athletes performing better than her, since she, to a lot of people who have, like, one, she opened up a lot of people, especially people like around Houston, to gymnastics and things like that, since she's in so many of those categories that they do in gymnastics, or the events, I mean. Yeah, I it's sort of weird to see her performing less than the other athletes there.
Yeah, it's a paradigm shift for people.
It really was, because I was like, she was like the Michael Phelps of gymnasts, and especially as someone who's in Houston, it's like, she can't be beaten. You have that expectation, which, we'll talk about a little bit later, managing expectations. I think that's a huge part of an athlete's view on things. But yeah, I thought that was kind of unbelievable, kind of a shell-shocking moment for my expectations to change of an athlete's. What is weird, you know, it's like seeing one of your heroes just like die in front of you, and it's just like, oh my gosh, come on, like how can this happen? This can't be, you know. And you have that like childhood hope that this person is just like a titan and they will prevail no matter what.
Everybody had that hope for her.
Yeah.
You know, but as I mentioned earlier, she's used to having her family around. They couldn't be there.
Okay.
The stress of being the greatest of all time, you know,
yes.
The whole Larry Nassar, USAG sexual abuse stuff was going on and at that time, and the hearings had taken place or were about to. I can't remember the timeline on that.
Yeah. A lot of distraction.
Well, stress.
Yeah.
You know, the twisties, mental blocks are always related to stress. I see it with gymnasts, cheerleaders, pole vaulters, golfers.
Yeah.
I've seen basketball players, their brain won't let them shoot because they're so afraid of missing.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's always related to stress. Like with Simone, I got an email from a doctor and he goes, "This is not related to stress. This is a neurological da-da-da-da-da." And I said, "Oh, so it just happened to happen at the time where she was under the biggest stress of her life. That's just a coincidence?" And he didn't respond to me. Yeah. He said that my theory that it was stress related was wrong, that neurologically. I said, no. I've been doing this a long time, and I worked with thousands of cases of kids with mental blocks, athletes with mental blocks.
Yeah.
It's always related to stress.
Yes.
We help them resolve the stress. They can tumble. They can do backward skills. They can pole vault, whatever it is.
So how do you deal with an athlete like Simone or someone that performing at that high of a level? How do you teach them, or do you teach them at all, to deal with the stress of other people's expectations of them?
Well, it's kind of simple. I mean, you can go there if you want. You know what I mean by that? Like, you might have expectations of me. Do I want to take that on?
Right.
But if you don't have the life skills and the emotional intelligence to be aware of that in the first place, that you have a choice, then we do a lot of work with teaching life skills and emotional intelligence. And like, I had an athlete in here the other day, and I had her stand right here, and I got a piece of paper and I put her initial in the middle, and I circled it, and I started walking towards her, and I told her to stop when I got into her space.
Okay.
And she said, stop. So I put a little mark. And I said, okay, turn an eighth of a turn. I walked toward her. She said, stop. We did that 8 times.
Okay.
And when we finished, I said, okay, look, you just declared your personal space with me.
Yeah.
Well, we have a personal space in all of our relationships. We have a mental, emotional, even a spiritual place. And you're surrounded by people that are storming your castle. That's the metaphor that I used with her.
Okay.
I said, your moats doesn't have any water in it. Your drawbridge is down and your gates are up. So we've got to teach you some life skills so you can keep people out of your castle that you don't want in there. And then if you do want them in there, you get to decide how long they come into your castle and which rooms they get to go to.
Right.
So I had to teach her life skills about how to set boundaries with people that were just invading her space and sucking the life out of her.
Yes.
So that's what I'm talking about. We're more of a whole person approach here. So we teach life skills to help them deal with other people's expectations. Do you want other people's expectations in your castle? No. But that also contributes to perfectionism, because we see so many athletes terrified of letting their parents or coaches or teammates down, afraid to make mistakes, comparing themselves to others, addicted to social media and what people are saying about them.
Yeah. I can imagine that social media has changed a lot of your industry
in a very bad way.
Right. Yeah. Everyone's become a lot more self-conscious of their performance, and what they're posting has to be their best performance. Or
even your best, you still get hammered.
Yeah.
But whenever I go do presentations, I do presentations on, it's called Athletes' Mental Health and Coaches' Wellness. And I did it at the NCAA Final Four here when it was in Houston with men's basketball. They invited me in to do this workshop. And one of the slides is a guy in the starting blocks in track and field, and he has his phone in his hand like this. And whenever that slide pops up, everybody starts laughing. And I said, what's funny? And they go, it's true.
Yeah.
You know? I was at a volleyball match with my daughter, and they had the JV girls on the court. The team they're getting ready to play, they had some of their JV girls out there shagging balls, and there's 2 girls in the middle of the court in warm-ups on their phones.
Wow.
And I took a picture of it. I left their faces out.
Right.
But I said, this is what we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
They can't even be on a basketball court helping their varsity team warm up without being on their phones.
Right.
Now, my daughter, when she played high school volleyball, as they got onto the bus, the coach took their phones and put them in a bag.
Yes.
And then they had to interact with each other and start bringing their focus in for the match.
Yeah.
I like that.
When I first started playing, so like I've always loved the social aspect of sports. Soccer, football, I played many growing up, and especially soccer, I played the most. And always the guy to talk, not in a bad way towards the other team, but talk like communication wise, communicate a lot and talk to my teammates a lot, trying to make sure that the communication's clear, trying to support whatever it is that they need, because I realize that role is like huge, especially when they are failing on the field. And having someone to go like, oh no, you're good, man. Like, hey, let's like, or at least maybe claiming the fault of whatever the play was. Mm-hmm. And they at least don't have doubt, knowing in my mind that they are not doubting themselves. If I take some of the blame, I'll take the rest of the blame. I don't care.
But you're strong enough to handle that. A lot of athletes aren't.
Yeah.
So they make a mistake, and then they're what we call highly reactive. They go into a tailspin. Their heart starts beating faster. It's harder to breathe.
Right.
They tense up. They withdraw. They get quiet. That's part of our athlete's assessment. Describe yourself to me when you're struggling.
Okay.
I get quiet. I withdraw. My heart beats faster. Chest is tight.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my coach and teammates. I'm afraid to make mistakes. And
yeah.
So you don't seem like when you were an athlete, you went to that place very often.
No. When I was competitive in sports, very much I'm happy-go-lucky. And when I was put in the role of like quarterback in 8th grade or something, I realized I had to take on a lot more, but I was already kind of used to it. Being in soccer for years prior to that, I was always the guy in the field that's just like, hey, let's move on. Let's just like, I'm never going to go back and really look at the past. Just next play, next. And that, because I just wanted to win. And I realized, I think like early on that like, hey, like I can't demand performance out of any of these people. But what I can do is just say, my bad. And like take some of the blame so that they feel like they didn't do anything wrong. And maybe they'll perform better. Mm-hmm. Like, and I don't know if they will, but it's much more likely. So I just like took that and ran with it. And but what was weird was the moment that I went into golf and it was individual, I like it was way different because I was terrible when I started, as every golfer is. They're pretty much awful. And I'm shooting like 110, 150, just awful, right? This is my junior year of high school. This is like when I first started. So what I loved about it was just like the social aspect of it. And what was weird is the kids who were on their phone. That was really weird to me. And like the competing mindsets between people was so weird. So you have some guys, when they're playing by themselves and they're not a part of a team, they're very quiet, very individualistic, and to them that's their zone. And to other guys, well, that's like my uncle. My uncle plays golf. He's a scratch golfer. That's how he plays. First time I play with him, it's very confusing for me. Since I'm an extrovert, I like talking when I play. I can trash talk. I can do whatever you want. But I at least like to socialize because my brain kind of gets distracted from, if there is any pressure, now it's gone when I talk. So I imagine it would be easier if I had a caddy or something. But
Well, what you're describing, I use it's called the Core Multidimensional Awareness Profile.
Okay.
And I've used it for 17 years with all kinds of peak performers and coaches and athletes and you name it. You're describing someone who's what's called an entertainer personality, and that's about connections, real important to you.
Yes.
And when you see these others, they're more probably organizer, introverted, focused on their routines and their rhythm and club selection and ball positioning at addressing the ball. And you're more out there, hey, nice shot. And I have a really cool story about that. I had a high school golfer came to see me quite a few years ago, and she had moved to the Houston area from another state, and she was an amazing golfer. She immediately came in and took over the number one position on her high school golf, and the girls didn't like it, and they turned on her, and she started struggling. So she comes to see me, and we start talking, and we did the assessment, best self, struggling self assessment.
Right.
And at her best, she was talkative, outgoing, encouraging whoever she was playing with, great shot. Yeah. And she gave that up because she felt like the girls didn't like that about her. So she started being quiet and withdrawn.
Yes.
And I said, that's their problem.
Yes.
You go back to being yourself again. And she said, okay, the heck with you guys. I'm just going to be myself again. Scores start dropping. She wins district, wins regionals, third at state, full ride D1 scholarship. Now she's playing professional golf.
Wow.
But connection was important to her.
Yeah.
And she got into this introverted, worrying about what people thought, didn't want to upset her teammates, afraid of them turning on her worse. And get back into that fire and passion and connection.
Yeah.
And she played better than she's ever played.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because when I have played with people who are more introverted, I will usually play worse.
Because you're not connecting.
Yeah, in the moment, if I can at least connect sometimes with myself, is what I've found is like, if I can connect with myself, then I actually can perform. It's the weirdest thing. Like, a lot of golfers out there, or a lot of individual sport athletes, they can talk to themselves in their head. In me, I'm like, I can't do it. Like, I have to like hear myself like say this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, like,
but what if you're at a foursome with three introverts?
Yeah, that's super weird. It feels like I'm alone. It feels like I'm alone.
You are.
Yeah, and I am. And my being will reach out to them probably the whole round, and I'll probably just get rejected the whole time.
And so you're burning up a lot of energy.
I am.
Yeah. I have another cool story about that too. I had a female golfer, and I was listening to her, and she was so over analytical and overthinker, and I said, describe one hole to me. Well, I addressed the ball, and I decided I'm going to hit 3-wood drive. Well, by the time she puts it in, I said, I'm exhausted. And I said, were there any trees on the course? And she goes, yeah. I said, what kind? And she goes, I don't know. Is there any water on the course? Yeah, by the green there was some water. Any birds or ducks around? I don't know. On the next tee box there, was there any plants or flowers? Yeah. What color? I don't know. I said, I want you to go out and play, and when you come back next week, tell me what kind of trees are on the course, what kind of birds were around the lakes that you saw.
Yeah.
What were the colors of the flowers around the tee boxes, if there were? And she goes, okay. She comes back the next week, and she goes, oh my gosh, what a different round, because she was into connection like you.
Right.
And so she was playing with people that were introverted, so she found a creative way to connect with her surroundings and appreciate the beauty and the trees and the ducks.
Right.
And she scored better.
Yeah.
Go figure.
So speaking of that, what's weird is, if I can separate myself from almost what's going on, because there's so much time in between shots out there that, you're completely right. I'm out there, and if I can interact with my environment, if not people, like, that's my only option. And so a lot of the times I'll just, like, before a shot, I'm not thinking about the shot at all. And I learned this from a guy named George Gankus. I saw a video once. He's a huge coach over in California. And most people in the golf world, if they know coaches at all, he's one that everyone pretty much knows. And so he talks about like the three. I think it's, I don't know exactly what he calls it per se, but he'll listen for like a sight, a sound. Usually it's like 3 sounds is what he'll listen for, and he'll just like close his eyes and just listen for 3 sounds, and then he'll make his swing,
bringing it in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it really helps him focus on whatever it is, and it's never going to be someone else in their sound what they make. It's always going to be like trees and leaves and birds and things like that, cars driving by. What's interesting though is that I have 2 brothers. All 3 of us have played golf with each other, and it feels really weird because I'm kind of like right in the middle of their mindset. One cares a ton, and he practices every day, and he hits the range every day, and per week he probably spends I don't know, basically a full-time job is what it's like. It's like having 2 full-time jobs. His real job, golf, that's it, which is super weird. Or at least a part-time job, let's just say 30 hours a week, but that's a lot for someone who's working. Then my other brother, who's younger than him, he is ultra competitive, right? But when he plays golf, he doesn't want to put in the time. He just likes having fun out there, and he's very much just like whatever. And for some reason it's interesting, like if he wants to be competitive, he can, and he's very, very competitive. But in this case, he's the opposite, and he doesn't care at all, and he'll hit driver off the deck on any shot if he wants to. That's how little he cares. He's like, I'll just hit 3 wood the whole round, and he'll still shoot like 94, and it's just funny. And you almost are like, how can you shoot in the 90s with just a 3 wood? Like, that's actually unbelievable. Like, that's really good with just a 3 wood, and he'll do it, and it's so funny. And I'm in the middle. Like, the oldest one cares so much about scoring so well, and after each hole he'll talk about, what just happened, and he'll talk about the mistake that happened on the last hole. And to me, it's irritating hearing that, because I'm like, dude, I don't want to hear about your past mistakes, because I'm trying not to think about whatever I did wrong in the last hole. I'm just trying to focus on this next shot, just this shot. And it's been really weird to play with those 2 completely opposite mindsets, in me kind of being in the middle of that, because I'll practice sometimes. But when I'm out there, I'm like, I want to shoot well. I'm not hitting driver off the deck every shot. But also, if I hit a bad shot, it's kind of like, all right, like, you got to be kidding me. But then I try to adopt the mindset of like, well, like, this gives me an opportunity to at least make up for what I just did.
Or how about, okay, this is my next shot.
Yeah, like, this is it.
Okay.
Like, I just have to accept the fact that I hit that
one. Okay, now on to my next shot.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about it for the next 3 shots.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a huge eye-opener for me, playing with both of them, especially the one that cared a lot. Because I was like, man, I really don't want to go down that road. And that was like very scary to me. Like, I'm like, man, I really just don't want to become like self-conscious of what I'm doing.
So if the entertainer's the mindset of connection,
yeah,
the organizers get it right. And so you're playing with a brother that's a real get it right.
Yeah.
But he's a stressed out get it right, because they have too much attention to detail.
Yeah.
Perfectionism, fear of making mistakes. So if he could learn to take a little bit of pressure off,
yeah,
he could still be probably innately an organizer. But if you use the positive aspects of the organizer, positioning, reading the greens,
yes,
wind positioning, grip on the club, and all that, without that perfectionism, afraid to make mistakes, dwelling on mistakes, he would play better, and he'd enjoy the game more.
I think he's played a lot better recently. In fact, just this past week he shot even par from we're all playing from the, well, he plays from the tips now, and so do I. Just to make it more challenging. But we've never broken par, any of us. So he's
getting close.
Yeah, he's getting there.
Cool.
He's 1 shot away.
Yeah.
And I stopped playing because it took away so much time and it was so hot outside this past summer. So I've just been like, I'm not doing it. But now it's starting to turn around a little bit, so I might hop back in. And what's interesting though is he'll get frustrated at me sometimes being upset with my score afterwards. Like usually I'm okay with it, and I'm more okay with it because I'll take a break and come back, and my score will change by like 1 stroke, like I didn't even leave. And I'll shoot. Let's just say like if I'm really playing really well, I'll probably shoot like, and I'm like playing every day, I think I would probably shoot like high 70s, like 77, 78. Now, it feels like my ceiling is like 85. And if I could go out, play right now, and I'll probably shoot like 85. Like, it's like no difference. And to him, that's frustrating because I put in 0 time. And I really want to ask, like, how, like, it's weird to me that other athletes are affected by others' performance. And like what you were saying, the castle, I think that's a great metaphor.
It is.
You know, and it's like, to me, I've never really heard that before, and I think that's a great eye opener for a lot of listeners to
for a
close,
life, not just
to
sports,
close that gate.
Yeah.
And like my grandpa taught me when I was young. He you know, was like, you know, let other people, like, you're allowed to see other people make mistakes. They decide that, like, to focus on their mistakes. They made a mistake. They either get to decide to focus on it or they move on, but you have nothing to do with it. So if someone's raging, you know, on your team, on your football team, your soccer team, whatever, like if you're on a team with them, your goal is to try to diffuse the situation. But if you're playing against them, you know, let it happen.
Yeah.
You can't be a part of it.
Well, it means you're getting in their head, you know. So your performance as an individual or team is affecting them.
Yeah.
And they're starting to. Well, that's what we call the difference between being highly reactive and responsive.
Right.
You know, that's why mindfulness is so important in sports. Self-awareness, learning how to recognize when you're starting to short circuit. You know, what are the early warning signs? Well, I start biting my nails.
Right.
Or I get a knot in my stomach. And
yes.
And that whole continuum can go from I start getting frustrated, I withdraw, all the way over to I throw up. I mean, I've had athletes come in here because they throw up before a swimming competition or a track meet or gymnastics.
Yeah, I would usually just go to the bathroom, and I would get the butterflies. But to me, I think I require the butterflies.
A certain level of butterflies. But throwing up means you're producing too many stress-related hormones, and your body's trying to get rid of them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've known some athletes that are like
worked
that.
Up. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a guy in high school that if he didn't go through up, we weren't ready to play.
Yes.
He threw up before every game, and the games he didn't throw up, we didn't play as well. So we weren't locked in enough. I wish he wouldn't have thrown up every game, but he did. That was just his deal.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, the show Quarterbacks. Did you watch that?
It's on my list of. I have not.
Okay, so in the show, Kirk Cousins, he gets a lot. They show clips of him getting help from a sports psychologist, but they also show, I don't know what machine this is. They kind of explain it, but only momentarily. He's got like those sticky things that you like put on your head, and basically it's supposed to be like brain stimulus, I guess, to maybe lower stress or deal with stress. And it's supposed to be like teaching his brain that, like, how to deal with it. And it looked super weird, but honestly, I think that exposure to that kind of therapy, like mental therapy, is a huge reason why he at least claimed it was a huge reason why he still can deal with the pressure out there.
It helps. It contributes.
Yeah.
It's not the answer.
Right.
I know what you're talking about. It helps turn on different switches in the brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would be the answer, you would say? Like, Does that vary? Is you're saying like depending on the
athlete? Well,
what
they do is if it's what I think it is, they take some initial measurements of brain functioning.
Okay.
And then they find where there's deficiencies, and then that helps bring those deficiencies up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So if part of the brain isn't firing the right way, then those little electrodes that they're putting on there help bring different frequencies in the brain back up again.
Okay.
If it's what I think it is.
Okay.
Boy, I'd like to be the sports psych on that show, though. Talk about some free marketing to NFL players. Wow.
Yeah. It was just like in this private room, Kirk Cousins and his sports psychologist, and they're he's really just talking about like his family life, and he talks about some of the stresses and some of the questions that were asked from the psychologist. I can't remember off the top of my head, but none of it was really like some of the questions he asked was related to his performance. Like, how do you feel about your performance? How is this performance? Are you still thinking about some of this stuff? And he's like, it's weird to see someone try to be like metacognitive in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's trying to like recollect, and he's like, is that impacting me? And I feel like how can you it's weird for some athletes to be 100% honest with themselves, and most athletes I feel like would lie, and they would just be like,
they don't come in here and lie.
Okay.
Why would they be here?
Yeah. But like is this game still affecting you? Like, are you still thinking about this? And would some go, well, now I am, since you brought it up.
But if they understand the concept of energy for performance,
yeah,
and you do a good job of educating them, then they go, well, yeah, that guy took a cheap shot on me and I missed 2 weeks. Yeah, that's still I didn't realize it, but that's still bothering me. Or the ref called me for holding on a critical third down play, and there wasn't any chance that that was a terrible call and it cost us the game.
Yeah,
I need to get that behind me. I didn't realize it was bothering me. So if they understand the concept that performance is not just physical energy, but it's mental and emotional energy also.
Yeah.
They learn to identify where those energy leaks are taking place, and then they're open to sealing the leak, so to speak.
Okay. That makes sense. I get that. Would you say that all athletes, like 100% of the athletes that you've treated, actually, you know what? I'll re-ask this. Do all athletes benefit from your treatment, or are there some that, that have not seen any benefits, have there any that you've seen that have come out and there's been no increase in performance, or have they always come out with a better performance?
There's a lot of factors that contribute to that answer.
Okay.
I know the program that I've developed works,
yeah,
and I know that it works at the highest level. I mean, look around you, right?
Right.
So, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So I know it works at the highest levels. And, this is mostly Olympic memorabilia, but I've worked with NFL players on like 20 different teams, and so I don't have their stuff hanging around here, So I know it works at the highest level is my point. But there's some that just don't buy in. They come in here and they'll come in 3 weeks later and they're struggling. I go, well, are you doing this? No. You doing this? No. Well, what about this skill I taught you here? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So it's a waste of their time and their parents' money, or their money if they're the ones paying for it.
Right.
There are some that they come in here and they work their tails off, and on the ride home from their baseball game, they're getting screamed and yelled at by their parents for striking out. Or the gymnastics, why did you fall on beam? Or they go back to the fire-breathing coach. And like I ask this question with athletes that have bad coaches. It's like, how much of your energy for success, your brain power, your mental and emotional energy is going into beam or throwing strikes or whatever it is, and how much of that is going into deflecting yourself from protecting yourself from the hostilities of your coach? I asked that to an athlete the other day, and she went, wow. She went 80% coach, 20% my sport.
Wow.
So that's energy that's not going into her sport. So I can teach her skills all day long on how to help him or help her face that coach. This was a male coach in this case. But if I keep sending her back into the fire-breathing dragon, I'm not going to be very effective with them because it's a hostile environment.
Right.
Okay, so it's their buy-in is a factor. Their environment is a factor.
Yeah.
If there's previous injuries, sometimes that can be a factor. That can, like, someone can come in to see me on performance, and I'll go, any serious injuries? Well, no. Okay, we'll just check it. Well, why do you ask? Well, because injuries take up a lot of space in the brain. Oh, well, I tore my ACL 2 years ago.
Then it comes in.
Yeah, and they go, oh, and then we work on the injury, and they go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I feel great. I had no idea because they've suppressed all that. So, like I said, there's a lot of factors that contribute. Like, I had a guy, this was several years ago, but his daughter was a very talented athlete, got her in to see me. She had a really bad injury. And he says, she went back and said he wants to help me with such and such injury, and he calls me and goes, I didn't bring my daughter in to see you for you to help her with her injury. I brought her in there for you to help her get better and get prepared for college. So she's going to be a D1 athlete. And I said, what's your profession? And he goes, I'm a dentist. And I said, how would you feel if I came into your practice and told you how to do a root canal extraction and that you're holding the equipment wrong and you need your lights? But he goes, I wouldn't like that. I said, well, then don't tell me how to do my job. And he was like, okay, I got it. And he left me alone, and I helped her, and she had a great 4-year career in college.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to protect your castle with parents too.
Yeah, right.
And if the parents are a source of interference, then the kid isn't going to reach their full potential. The athlete won't reach their full potential. I call it the three-legged stool. Coaches, parent, athlete. If there's weaknesses in any one of those stools, the athlete's not going to reach their full potential.
Right.
Any one of those legs of the stool, they won't reach their full potential. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
I use metaphor a lot. You get it?
I totally get it. That makes total sense. Yeah. When I played, like, speaking of coaching and bad coaches versus good coaches, it's weird to see, like, the difference between some coaches that are really, really good at pushing you, but, like, off the field, you can, like, go to them, and they can switch from being like, hey, let's go, high energy, and it's very intense practice, and it's very strict, but they don't scold you when you make a mistake, per se. When you do make a mistake, you pay for it in some ways. Like, hey, you made a mistake like this, go run a lap, whatever. But
why is that necessary?
Yeah,
I've never understood why that's necessary.
I don't get it either. But
that's the no mistakes coaching style,
right? And although I will say, the best coach that I had was kind of like that. Although he was the nicest guy off the field ever. On the field, he is yelling so much, and it's not like yelling, scolding. It was just an intensity, and you wanted to be good for him too.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, and it was because he
pumped
weird.
energy into the system.
He could go from 10 to 1 on the field or off the field whenever you want, and he could go from a yell to a whisper, and it was so dynamic that all of us, like, loved it. And in fact, right now, the Texans player Jalen Petrie, he's a safety right now. His rookie year was last year. This is his second year. So next week will be, I imagine, his first game for this season, or first real game. And he had a great rookie year. He was a part of that team. I was in 7th grade. He was in 8th grade. And our coach was a guy named Coach Vida. And his son's name was Storm, and he was on the team too. And he actually, I think he might still be a professor at U of H, but I'm not sure. Either way, super smart guy, super nice guy, and it was the best coach that I had. After that year, he left, and we were left with another coach that we had, completely different style. And those, when we lost like Jalen and we lost some of these athletes, a lot of us younger ones had to step up, and the system completely changed. And when it changed from that coaching style that we were so efficient from and we were winning with to this, we all just went like dropped off. Mm-hmm. We dropped off like off a cliff. It was insane. And I've never seen such a performance change that fast. But I realized like how effective his coaching was the moment he left. And I was like, man, like we're all willing to just stick our neck out for this guy. Like he
play for him, work for him.
Yeah, and like
your buy-in was high.
He had high expectations, but he was fully confident in your capabilities. He was like I'm gonna show you how to do it right. Mm-hmm. But I know you can do it. And he would have these one-on-ones with everyone in individual parts of the practice where he would just like come up to you and just like whisper in your ear, and he'd be like go and get it done.
The horse whisperer.
Yeah. It was very personal in that way, and it was really odd. I've never had a coach like him. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of coach doesn't come around that often. So
I had those kind of coaches, that one of them is I'm still close with today, and we're having when we came in here and met today, we're having a 50-year reunion from my Friendswood 1973 state championship football team, and I get to one of my buddies from high school just called me last night to finish setting this up, but I'm going to interview him for a video interview for us we're having a big dinner banquet celebration, and going to honor us at halftime the night before and all that. But I get to interview my old high school coach. I think it's going to be a really emotional experience for me,
right?
Because I'm still all these years later so close to him.
Yeah.
Like I texted him the Father's Day a couple of weeks ago. I said, "Hey, happy Father's Day. You've always been like a dad to me." And he says, "You've always been like a son to me."
Wow.
And I was blessed because I had him a little bit in junior high. And then I went to high school and I had a different coach my freshman year. But I had him all 3 years of varsity, and he was my track coach for a couple of years. So he was my guy because my parents divorced and my dad wasn't around very much.
Yeah.
And Coach Hamilton just filled right on in and filled in all the gaps. And
it's a very much underrated part of the stool that you talk about.
Yeah, and what came up for me a minute ago when we were talking with this was with parents and coaches, there's a business side to our relationship. And there's also a personal side.
Right.
And we get in, and if we're out of balance one way or the other, too lenient, not enough accountability, no personal responsibility, or overbearing, too difficult, screaming, yelling, punishing, it creates deficits in the relationship with the athlete or the child.
Right.
And then those deficits start showing up in changes in behavior or performance. So, there's some coaches that are all business.
Yes.
And some of them are very, very successful.
Yeah.
So people follow that model. But I don't think it's like one of the things that I mentioned earlier that I did that mental health presentation at the NCAA Final Four here in Houston back in March. The weekend before that, I was watching Texas was getting ready to play Miami in the Elite Eight to decide who went to the Final Four. So pregame, I'm watching Charles Barkley, Kevin Johnson, and those guys talk. I love to listen. They're just so wise.
Yeah.
And Charles Barkley, he looks right at the camera.
Yeah.
And he goes, all you coaches out there that think you have your system, he says, today's athletes have changed.
Yes.
They want to be treated more respectfully. They're more sensitive, and he listed all these traits and qualities and attributes about today's athletes. And he says, so if you're going to stick to your system and you're not learning how to adapt to today's athletes, you're going to get left behind. And there's coaches out there that have learned to adapt to the different ways that athletes need to be treated and coached and instructed and taught. And I admire those coaches. But the ones that stick to that only, and I think that's what why the transfer portal is so hot, because there's athletes that transfer for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
They're bad teammates, they're uncoachable, they're just going to carry their baggage with them.
Yeah.
And there's others that transfer because The culture is not the right culture. That's the responsibility of the coaches in the athletic department. The way that they're being coached or not coached, or the coaches, I've had athletes where the coaches, they're very, very talented, but the coaches have them in a little box and they're never going to get out of that box. They keep playing everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
So they transfer and then they're a star somewhere else. So there's all different reasons, but ultimately the coach is responsible for the culture. Mm-hmm. And then the culture determines what kind of success you're going to have in the program. You saw that in high school when you got a new coach. The culture changed, your program fell apart.
Yeah. Yeah, it was huge. It's interesting that you say that because I did football my freshman year and I was very confident in my capabilities and what I could do. And I was like, man, I could be very beneficial to this team, but there's only one team. We didn't have like a JV and varsity. It was just like varsity basically. And I'm a freshman. They're not going to play me that much, But I'm like, at least I'm like, just put me out there because I wouldn't have dropped that pass. I wouldn't have dropped those passes, And I was fairly confident in all that stuff. Puts me out one time or twice. Both times, I'm good. Caught a touchdown, whatever. And it's like, but I was so frustrated in the fact that I didn't get anything. And then in the locker room, it was brutal because everyone, I'm like, I want a team that's willing to support each other. But what it felt like was that, they were outcasts and they always pick on the freshmen or whatever. And I'm like, man, where's the support for us? Because I'm like, dude, like, I'm making good plays, and no one's there like to support the freshman who's new or who's not big enough yet, who could be really good. Mm-hmm. And that was so weird. And so like there was some physical, I wouldn't say abusiveness, but I would say bullying in that room. And so it felt like really the freshman group was very like outcasted on that group.
Part of the culture.
And it was. And I hated it. Mm-hmm. So then I just left. And I was like, I'm just going to focus on soccer. And so I did. And we played well. We slowly but surely, by the time I was a senior, we had to build the culture, and the coach wasn't that good, but it was more dependent on me and another guy who's the captain, Isaiah. So it was just basically two co-captains just running this whole system is what it felt like. And it felt like we didn't even have a coach at some times, but like we were it.
Well, you did. You were it.
Yeah, we were it. And so we did well. I mean, like our senior year, we ended up doing a lot better once we both had figured out, what to do, because we had been basically a part of that team for a long time, and we looked up to the seniors to run us. But once we were in charge, it was great, because we knew how to deal with it. He was harsh, and I was supportive, so it was kind of funny. It was like good cop, bad cop out there. Mm-hmm. And he had expectations, and I would try and kind of like bring him in. I'm like, hey man, like it's all right. Like
you were more the stabilizer of the group.
Yeah. I loved doing that. Mm-hmm. That's like my favorite role.
That's kind of that's what we call the relator personality in Cormat.
Okay.
You want the people around you to feel a part of and belonging and happy and
yeah.
So you might be what's called an entertainer relator.
Okay.
Yeah. You feel a lot, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds like you.
Yeah.
I spent one season with the Houston Rockets, the 2014-2015 season, and it was amazing, to walk into that world and learn a lot, but also offer a lot. And Kevin McHale was the coach, and he won multiple NBA championships with the Boston Celtics and top 50 NBA all-time player. And Hakeem Olajuwon used to come in and work with Clint Capella one-on-one and help him. And they had Trevor Ariza, Jason Terry, Corey Brewer, Josh Powell. They had all won NBA championships with the Lakers and the Mavericks. And so one day I went to Akeem Olajuwon and I said, can I have 5 minutes with you? Because I want to talk about what the 94-95 teams did to win NBA championships. We talked for 45 minutes, and I'm just taking notes, right?
Yeah.
And it was the most remarkable conversation. He was so open with me, and we just sat down in the stands and just talked and talked and talked and talked. I'm making all these notes, and I went, wow, I got Corey Brewer here. I got Trevor Ariza. So I talked to all of them, talked to Kevin McHale. And then I have a friend, Mark Williams, who's the men's gymnastics coach at Oklahoma. He's won 7 NCAA titles.
Right.
And I know Valerie Condos Fields out at UCLA. She's won 9, so I talked to her.
Yeah.
And then I knew some Olympians that had been on Olympic championship teams, and I talked to them. It was the same story.
Okay.
And I came up with 17 traits of championship teams. And what you're describing here with coaching, one of those is they follow effective coaching leadership.
Yeah.
And I have effective in bold letters because there's a lot of ineffective coaches out there.
Yeah.
And they wonder why their team doesn't reach their full potential.
Right.
And so that was one of the key ones. If a coach is coaching the right way and empowering and creating the right culture, athletes are going to follow that.
Yes.
And if they're not going to have the buy-in that they need from their athletes to reach their full potential.
Yeah. Totally. No, that's very yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I think the buy-in is a huge factor in that for sure. It's the difference for me between the coaches that I pretty much have never respected. I never thought our team was that good, but when I found that whatever they were doing worked, yeah, my buy-in's going to be a lot higher. And like if I feel like my usefulness to the team is really high, then my buy-in's going to be higher. And it's a double-edged sword, really. Like, they work both ways. If I'm being used, or I'm at least being taught how to move correctly, or how to work correctly, or at least practice correctly, these things that they can use me for, I'm like, just use my strengths. If you can figure out how to use me or use each individual person the right way, their buy-in's super, super high, and I've seen it. And more often than not, I see the coaches that are the opposite, and they don't know how each one of these players work. And it's frustrating to me to see coaches that don't pull aside players, talk to them individually, ask about other players, ask about them, what they think they're best at, and help them raise that part up. And there's two different ways to do it, really. Is like, well, do you want to improve the thing that they're really bad at? Or do you just want to make them who they are and make them really, really good at who they are? And I feel like the latter of the two has always been like the most successful. And it's always like, you're really, really good at communicating. You're really, really good at bringing other people up. So I want you, it's in fact a positional thing as well. I don't want you on a corner of the field on the soccer field. I don't want you in the corner. I want you in the middle. I want you in the mix. And the reason why is because you can touch more people. And the more people you can touch, now the level of energy is a little bit higher, and the confidence is a little bit higher. It's like, let's just like try and do that. And like, instead of positioning off of just skill, it's like, well, this guy could also play that position.
And that's brilliant coaching, because they're looking at the players on their team that can bring, they can bridge the gap between coach and player team. With these great teams I talked about at Friendswood, I had 5 guys on varsity that lived right by me. One next door, one across the street, one a few houses down, and one around the corner.
That's cool.
And I remember one time I was sitting in my living room, and the doorbell rings.
Yeah.
And it's Jim Grimsrud with Corey Criswell, and he goes, "Let's go, get your shoes." And he was a senior, one of what we called the Big Four. There was 4 guys that were our leaders, team captains, and He said, let's go. We're going to go run. So we went out and ran like 3 miles. And I hated it, but I did it because I respected Jim Grimsrud. He wasn't my coach.
Yeah.
He was my friend. He was my neighbor.
Right.
But our coaches had done a brilliant job of empowering guys to step up. And my senior year, we didn't have that. Everyone was afraid to step out into that position of leadership. And if you did, you got laughed at and all. We lost that one district game, but we didn't reach our full potential because we didn't have that strong leadership.
Do you think what would have made, because I've been in that same situation before, and do you think the difference would have been let all the seniors come together, have a meeting or whatever, without a coach, let's just say, there, and let's just say 2 or 3 of y'all try and lead that, and would that be the solution where, like, guys, we need people to step up, and, like, it's going to be blah and blah and blah, or do you think you need the coach to be there to say, this is who it's going to be?
Well, I think it could be either or, depending on the culture, but there's been times I've seen when coaches select captains and the captains aren't the best choices for a captain.
Right.
And there's other ways to lead than being loud and vocal. You can lead by example.
Yeah.
You can lead by being a good teammate. You can lead by your work ethic.
Yeah.
And if a coach says, I want the loud, vocal, rah-rah guy to be our team captain and leader, and no one's willing to follow that because they have bad character or whatever it is, I think leadership needs to emerge.
Right.
And then when you choose team captains, you pick from, I think a healthy way to pick a team captain is you look at how motivated, how much do they buy in, what's their character like, what kind of leader are they, and who's going to fit that mold, and then that's your team captains, not,
right.
They're your all-state player and it's all about them and they're not a good teammate. Yeah, but they're an all-state player, so they're our team captain. You get where I'm coming from?
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look more at character, and I think that's an important part of leadership.
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah, it's not the best player. I've seen that a lot. That's a big choice for coaches.
Yeah, and like we called them our big four. Jim was just a commander type, straightforward. Chuck loved music and dogs, and Craig Clardy was more funny, and Phil Johnson was more serious. But they were all great leaders in their own way, and I love those guys still. And this was 50 years ago I'm talking about. You know, and I can't wait to see them in October when we have our reunion because they were a year ahead of me.
Right.
And they still influenced my life in such profound ways. They weren't my coaches. They were my friends and my teammates, but they had, and I hope they hear this, I hope they hear this, that they still have an impact on my life.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And they were all different. They were all different characters. They were all different personality and unbelievable athletes.
Yeah.
A receiver, an offensive line. All of them were offensive linemen, a linebacker, and they weren't the star all-state quarterback. It was their character that determined if they were our leaders.
Yeah, it's definitely something special. Well, I think we can conclude the podcast here. If you'd like to plug in now,
thank you.
Your book or
I have a book. It's the Champions Mental Edge. I wrote it right after the Rio Olympics because there was such a demand for my services. And then I had a guy come to see me and he said, have you ever thought about turning your product into a video series? And I said, yeah, I've been wanting to do that. I just hadn't found the right people. And he said, well, I'm a videographer. He wanted to interview me about something. So we did. And he hooked me up with this group and we turned it into a video series. It's called the Champions Mental Edge. You can go to championsmentaledge.com. The book is available on Amazon. And my practice here is the Institute of Sports Performance here in Houston, Texas. And you can go to tinssp.com and read all about us. We specialize in performance, leadership, transitioning in and out of sports. We do a lot of work with traumatic sports injuries, developing culture. And like I said, we have a wonderful whole person approach that goes light years beyond breathing and visualization.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. But that's it. That concludes the first episode of The
Thanks
Mental
for
Edge.
having me.
Yeah.
Congrats.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned for future episodes. And remember, success is just a mindset away.